There we go. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? I wasn't kidding about doing it outside with an umbrella. The only problem was I couldn't remember where my umbrella was. I found it, and here we are at Casa Otto, surrounded by the sounds of nature and somebody's barking dog. Yeah, we got a lot to cover tonight, folks. Hopefully this light rain doesn't progress to anything more than what we've got right now. If we do, I might have to put you on hold for a second and relocate. But anyway, hang on here. Let's get the slideshow started. Here we go. Right. So if you had a chance to read last week's column, or even if you didn't, we're going to start off with a little look at a plant we call Prairie Dropseed, Sporobolus heterolepis. This is a plant that is on my mind every year at this time. One, it's a gorgeous, fairly low growing prairie grass. It's a native Illinois grass. And it's appearing more and more in mass plantings. I've seen them in parking lots. It's a very heat tolerant and drought tolerant type of plant. It sends down a long root and it tolerates those harsh conditions that we can see in parking lots. But it's mainly on my mind for another reason, and that's its aroma. Here's a look at the plant in bloom. Now it is a grass, you know, we don't typically talk about, I think of grasses as having flowers, but they do. It's a little bit different type of flower, and there's a lot of different botanical terms that are used to describe the flowers that are on grasses. There's a really neat breakdown of how this grass got its scientific name too. Sporobolus comes from the way the seed, it's funny, the genus actually has some plants where the seeds are ejected as the seed itself ripens. Prairie Dropseed doesn't do that so much as it drops its seeds. Although, you know, I had a question from somebody who, after reading the article, was wondering if they should plant it or would it overtake their plantings in their yard. This isn't really a plant, even though it produces a lot of seeds, it's not really one that spreads a lot by seed. It does much better if you transplant plugs or install plants as opposed to trying to start it from seed. The species name, heterolepis, just kind of dabbles just a little bit into some of those botanical terms that I mentioned in the column. This isn't going to be a botanical section of this plant tonight. There's all kinds of neat and kind of fun names, actually, like glooms that refer to different parts of the prairie grass flowers, or grass flowers, I should say. We're gonna just actually leave that for what it is and get into the other part of the article that I've heard from several people on, and that is the scent that these flowers give off. There's actually a gland at the base of these little tiny blooms, and it gives off a smell that I learned as buttered popcorn, and to me it does smell like buttered popcorn, but it's not microwave buttered popcorn, and it's not movie theater buttered popcorn. To me, it's the smell of the popcorn that was sold at the dime store in Wheaton, Front Street, Scutes 5 and 10. That was it Woolworths? Actually, I think it was a Woolworths on Front Street. I think Scotts was up on Main Street. But anyway, the dime store had a lunch counter, And at the one end of the lunch counter, really close to the door where you came in, there was this greasy old glass-sided popcorn maker. And whether it was the oil that they used or the butter flavored salt that they sprinkled on it, whatever it was, it had a very distinct aroma. And that to me is what the flowers on Prairie Dropseed smell like. Now, there's some people, and I just talked to a gentleman yesterday, he had his face buried in some of the Prairie Dropseed outside of Hickory Knolls, and he said, no, I get cilantro. That's what I get when I smell it, which isn't an unpleasant aroma either. There's people who love cilantro, there's people who hate cilantro. And for some people's noses, that is the aroma that they pick up. Now, some people say, ugh, it smells like detergent, or less specifically, they'll say, oh, it's just kind of a nasty chemically smell. I guess I could kind of see that. But again, I fall into the buttered popcorn. This is, I don't know if this is a way that we could, break down genetically, some people, like people who can, curl their tongues or wiggle their ears, rub their bellies, pat their heads, all these different tendencies that some people have and some people don't. We might be able to divide ourselves up by way of this. That the other day I heard one other smell that no one else has ever likened this aroma to. Now, whether this fellow is from a unique genetic line or whether his nose just is very different from all the rest of ours, but he said he thinks it smells like Welch's grape juice. So I've been trying to get this, and again, I can kind of see where he's going with it. I close my eyes and I kind of, you see these wine connoisseurs, taking in the bouquet of a fine wine. I was doing this with a Prairie Dropseed in downtown Wheaton, and getting some kind of strange looks while I was doing it, but doggone, I still came back to buttered popcorn. I'd be most interested to hear from you guys if you have other takes on the aroma that this plant gives off. In the column I did mention, I wasn't able to find any solid reference to why this plant puts off an odor. Most of our flowering plants that do have a scent do so they can attract some sort of pollinator, but these grasses are wind pollinated, so wind doesn't need a scent in order to to do its pollinating job. There is some people who think that maybe the aroma is there, the scent is there to repel things that might be grazing on it. It's not bad if a few birds come and eat some seeds, but if a big old bison were to come along and start munching on this, they could, I don't know, I would think they would spread the seeds. But I would think some seeds would be able to pass through the digestive tract. I would think bison would be attracted to buttered popcorn, but what do I know? It does have, it's one of our most strongly scented grasses, and it is blooming right now. Now, as I mentioned, I was in downtown Wheaton not too long ago, and I came across this bed of Prairie Dropseed. This is, for those of you familiar with the town, this is on North Hale Street. I actually smelled it before I saw it, and I was happy to have my mom out that day. I was pushing her along, and I trying to figure out where the smell was coming from. I saw the plants in a distance, and I started to tell her about Prairie Dropseed. And as I'm telling her, this family was approaching us on the sidewalk, and before I even got to say, Mom, it smells like buttered popcorn, this one kid just started going, ew, what's that smell? Ew, pew. And all the kids started shrieking and they ran away. And then my mom, being kind of a little kid herself, goes, ew, what's that smell? Ew. So let's just say it, the experience of Prairie Dropseed is highly subjective, but I hope you'll get a chance to experience it in one of its many placements before we get to fall. And even if you don't get to see it till winter, you'll find that it makes a beautiful structure that will stand up to light amounts of snow. Well, as we get something really heavy and wet, it's going to tip over, but there's some very pretty winter scenes I've seen with prairie dropseed standing in the back. So from there, let's move along. I'm going to see if I can get this video started and get some music. Not the coolest little video. This was sent in by a couple out in Sugar Grove. They have, I believe they said 6 acres that borders a wetland, and they get all kinds of wonderful creatures. Clarice and Greg are their names. They get all kinds of wonderful creatures in their yard. Greg was out exploring one day and he thought he saw a little movement in this log. And he looked a little closer, he waited a little bit, and sure enough, pop went the weasel. So what we saw there, that was the long-tailed weasel. I asked him about the size because it was a little bit hard to gauge by just watching the video. We do have the 2 different weasels. The least weasel, which is quite small, it's about the size of a bratwurst. And the long-tailed weasel has a body, it's about maybe 10 inches long or so, and then there's a tail on top of that. So a little bit bigger animal, not huge by any means. Neither one of these weasels is anywhere near as big as a mink, which has a body length of say a 1.5 feet or so. But it was just a fun little thing. And when Clarice sent it in, she titled it "Pop Goes the Weasel," and I thought you guys would appreciate seeing how these weasels do pop, especially when they're given the perfect setting of a log on a woodland floor like that. So this next little segment, the idea for it came to me the other day when I was out at Hickory Knolls. I was trimming some of our box turtles' toenails. Being indoor animals, they do need a little bit more care that way. A wild turtle is going to wear its nails down as it's walking. Although I should add, those of you, and I know there's some of you out there that have aquatic species, and you probably know this, Greg and Cal, I know you know this, but other people, aquatic turtles, especially our painted turtles and our red-eared sliders, you can tell the males from the females by looking at their nails. The males have very, very long nails, which they actually use in a delightful little courtship ritual where they stroke the neck and chin of a prospective female. The female's nails, though, remain short. But with our box turtles, the nails grow. There's no way to tell male from female by looking at the nails on the feet. Anyway, so that's what I was doing. I was clipping nails, and I thought, you know, we haven't really talked about how most of our native turtles here in North America have 13 moons or scutes on their back. The scutes, let's look at this picture here. Certain species, these sort of diagrams can be useful. There's the vertebral, or sometimes these are called the dorsal scales. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that go down the middle of the back. And then there's 4 more on each side. And this diagram, they're called pectoral scutes, and then some other references might call those costal scutes. But there's 4 + 4 + 5, that's 13. There's also these marginal scutes too, which are referred to in this diagram by the letter M. We're going to leave those aside for now and focus on these larger dorsal scutes. 13 of them, Native Americans, as the legend would have it, would assign the different full moons to those 13 scales. going anywhere from the winter moon. And by the way, they numbered them a little bit differently than the scientists did. For Native American purposes, they start in the upper left and go counterclockwise and then down the back, ending with the snow moon. It's not quite at above the tail. But whenever I look at a turtle, I think, how cool is that there's the same number of moons in a year as there are scutes on a turtle's back. And that's true whether you're looking at a snapping turtle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scales down the vertebrae, or the vertebral column on the back of the turtle, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 on either side. It works on painted turtles. This one happened to be laying some eggs in June. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, we can't quite see it. 5 is down there. 1, 2, 3, 4 plus 4. 8 plus 5 is 13. So here is one of my, almost called her a victim. I'm not that good at cutting nails. Here's one of my turtles that I was working on the other day at Hickory Knolls. This is Daisy, the 3-toed box turtle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And the reason this occurred to me, we have another 3-toed box turtle, and her name is Sally Jane. Laura, I'm sure you remember Sally Jane. Sally Jane was named by the preschool campers, the kids who were in preschool nature camp several years ago. Half of Laura's group wanted to name the turtle Sally, and half the group wanted to name the turtle Jane. Hence, we came up with the name Sally Jane. Now let's count Sally Jane's scutes. Here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Hold on, what's going on here? This is a way we will always be able to identify Sally Jane. I don't know exactly what happened to her, as is the case with almost all of our box turtles at Hickory Knolls. She came to us as a mature adult. She came from a family that realized that having a pet that lived 80 or 90 years wasn't feasible for their lifestyle. So being a female box turtle, she blended right in with the other females that we had. But every once in a while when she'd be walking, her rear legs would kind of lock up a little bit, and she'd end up almost dragging her hind end. And it wasn't for several months after we had her that I realized she had some sort of an injury. Now, whether she was dropped from a great distance, or maybe I'm thinking she might have been nicked by a car here in the back. Something crushed these scutes back here, and you can see that they've healed. And until you start counting scutes, she doesn't really look that odd. But when you look more closely, you realize that when the injury healed up again, the seams, or the edges of where the crack had occurred in her shell didn't quite knit back together right. So Sally Jane will always be the exception to the 13 moons on turtle's back rule. Kind of neat, huh? So after I finished trimming the nails there at Hickory Knolls, I went outside and I saw a large dark object on the ground. And when I looked a little closer, I realized it was a moth. That's my 2 5/8 inch stick of lip balm. I gotta get it. It's almost out. I don't want to, throw it away before it's finished, but it is getting kind of ratty. Maybe I should get a stunt lip balm for pictures so it looks a little nicer. Anyway, 2 5/8 inches. So this moth from stem to stern here is over 2 inches long. Pretty remarkable looking creature. We see these frequently at this time of year at Hickory Knolls. I suspect it was drawn to our outside lights, even though we try to be sensitive to, not sending light up into the sky. We do have some downward facing lights, and our nature center is right next to a community garden plot. This is another look at the moth. What it goes from being quite plain and probably well camouflaged had it landed on a tree to having some really bright markings underneath. This actually helped confirm the identification. What we're looking at here is the adult form of the tobacco hornworm. A lot of times around here, we just call them tomato worms, but there's actually a couple different types. The tomato hornworm, and I may have showed this graphic before. It's one of my favorite, well, it's my only hornworm meme, but in this area, we tend to get the caterpillar on the left, the tobacco hornworm, feeding on our tomatoes. The tomato hornworm there on the right, if you look at them quickly, you might think they're pretty darn similar, but then when you look at them more closely, let's do what we have to do down here in this memory device. 7 lucky stripes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, that checks out. There's also, you can't really see it from this angle, there's a red tip, much as like you would see on a lit cigarette. So 7 lucky stripes or lucky strikes means you found a tobacco hornworm. We do occasionally, and if you travel around, you might definitely run into the tomato hornworm, which has 8 V stripes. Can you see how it's a little easier to see as we go down the side here of this caterpillar, how there's the light portion that slashes up, but then there's also a light portion that forms the other part of the V. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 V's is V8 juice. You know, you're looking at a tomato hornworm. V8 juice, of course, is tomato based. So anyway, just a little tip or trick to help distinguish those two creatures that might be munching on your tomato plants. I took this picture a couple of years ago on my tomato plant. This is a tobacco hornworm that had a visit by this creature here. This is Cotesia congregata. It's a parasitoid wasp. Now, parasitoids are a little different from parasites. Parasites, they don't want to kill their hosts. They need to, if they kill their host, they're going to die too. But a parasitoid actually ends up killing the host. It usually uses it either for some sort of food. Usually, what we're looking at here, all those white things on the caterpillar there on the left that look sort of like grains of rice, those are actually cocoons that the wasp larvae have spun. The caterpillar underneath at this point is kind of a hollow zombie. This was a tremendous number of wasp larvae that were living inside of it. They eat the caterpillar from the inside out, and when they're ready to pupate, they come out through the skin and they spin these silken kind of oblong cocoons. Now, this picture on the right makes this wasp look quite large. It's actually about 1/8 of an inch long. These are not big wasps. They're not something that you need to be afraid of, especially if you're allergic to wasp things. These aren't at least bit interested in you unless you've got hornworm tendencies. They don't want anything to do with you because they're looking to lay their eggs on these host insects. I always encourage people when they see things like this, I've gotten calls from people who say, oh, this thing was infested with it. I threw it away or I put it in alcohol. If you want to encourage these parasitoid wasps, which are a chemical-free way of controlling the caterpillars that feed on your tomatoes. I would encourage you to leave these caterpillars and let those eggs, those larvae develop, because they do a really good job of helping keep these insects in check. We don't want to kill them all though, because that first slide, showing the adult moth, those are very busy nighttime pollinators. So even though the hornworms themselves get kind of a bad rap because they feed on your tomatoes, their adult form visit a lot of flowers at night and perform an important pollinator service. So let's stay in the Lepidopteran vein for just a couple more slides here. This is a photo that I received from Jill, one of our restoration ecologists. She was, they had been working out in the field, and she was moving some bundles of plant material that they had removed from an area. And she looked down and she thought, what in the, it didn't even really look real. Those crazy orange spots on that maroon head, orange little prolegs. What in the world is this thing? Well, I was super excited. I've never seen one of these in real life. I've only read about them. This is actually the caterpillar of, didn't put the label in. This is a 6-spotted skipper. You've seen these guys, I'm sure you have, flittering around. Skippers are lepidopterans. They're classified just a little bit differently. They look very much like a butterfly, but their antennae are just a little bit different. If you recall, I think in the past, I know we've talked about moth antennae. Moths will either have a thread-like antenna or a feather-like antenna. With butterflies, they have an antenna with a club on the end. So their two antennae have almost like the head of a pin, a little club on the end. Skippers, though, the tip of the antenna thickens and then it kind of hooks around. A unique adaptation for this group of lepidopterans. I'll tell you though, if you're really lucky, you might be able to see this, but for me, the giveaway with skippers is how they fly. They have this really kind of erratic flight. Here's the silver-spotted skipper on some bee balm, and it's feeding at the moment. Oh, now it's going to go next, but they fly really fast. It's hard for me to keep the phone on this little creature as it moved around. But they don't spend a whole lot of time usually in one spot. They flit around, and to me, it's that flight pattern that is the giveaway. They're not terribly huge. I would say they've got a wingspan of maybe 2 inches or just a little bit over. And again, the name is silver spotted skipper, but that spot actually white. So if you're lucky and you've got silver spotted skippers coming to your yard or parked near you, see if you can find yourself a silver spotted skipper larva. They feed on all the different plants that are in the pea family. I asked Jill, I was willing to bet money that day the restoration crew was out removing black locust, because that has been a target species for them for some time. And I've seen the masses that they've cut down. Jill said no, she didn't think it was from black locust. That day they had also been planting false indigo bush, and she's thinking that it had dropped down from one of those plants. So this is a partial list. Really, any legume is a possible host for it. Those plants that I bolded in this list are ones that are a little bit more common in this area. But anyway, keep your eyes open. Maroon head, the caterpillar itself was only about 2 inches long, but between that maroon head and those bright orange eye spots and that kind of a yellow lime green body, once you see one, your eyes will get trained, and then maybe you'll start to see more, because this is a fairly common insect in summertime here in northern Illinois. So remember last week we took a look at the eastern towhee, and I said it's so nice when a bird says its name. Let's listen here. This was outside of Hickory Knolls last week. Meow, 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 meow. Couple more just for good measure. Okay, so it's not technically saying its name, but it's making this sound that's in its name, that the animal in its name makes. That is the sound of the catbird. And this time of year, this is a bird that's in the Mimidae. It's a bird that will just, when it's singing during the breeding season, the song just goes on and on and on. I think we played it a few months ago, but I don't think we played the catbird sound that it makes. This is the sound that we're hearing now. The elderberries are winding down, but the pokeweed is winding or gearing up. The pokeweed is ripening right now, American pokeweed. Those are those plants with the red stems and the droops of, or drooping clusters of dark purple fruit that are ripening right now. I actually was talking to a visitor at Hickory Knolls the other day about American pokeweed. She said, you know, I used to let it go in my yard and then it took over, so I took it out. She said, is it native? It is native. American pokeweed is a native plant. The restoration team that we had at Hickory Knolls, say 10 years ago, didn't like pokeweed at all, and they took out every plant that they encountered because it does spread fairly aggressively. Our current restoration team thinks it's great and is letting it go. If they are managing an area for something more specific, they might remove plants, and because it makes a lot of berries and those berries contain a lot of seeds, yes, you're going to get a lot of pokeweed. In my own yard, well, you know me, I love catbirds, so I will let it go up to a point. I did take some out in the front because I was trying to encourage the Joe Pye to spread. So you can make up your own mind, but if you've got plants like that provide a nutritious source of food, chances are you will get yourself some catbirds too. So for the last couple of weeks, I've been saying, yeah, we're going to talk about fishing spiders, and then we kept running out of time. This time, I thought I'd better make sure to include them. This is Dolomedes scripta, which is one of a few fishing spiders that can be found in this area. Just to give you a sense of size here, those legs that front leg is about as long as my pinky finger. So this is a very large spider. And as you can tell by the name, fishing spider, they do tend to occur around water, along the Fox River, along its tributaries. Occasionally we'll see them around ponds too. There's a few other, there's a kind of a tannish colored fishing spider. It's called a six-spotted fishing spider that likes a little bit stiller water. We'll see that oftentimes in the wetlands, and the pothole wetlands behind Hickory Knolls, and other places too. But these spiders are pretty cool. They're part of a group called the nursery web spiders. Now, I did see, he wasn't in too good a shape. I did come across a male fishing spider. They don't get quite as large. Their legs are very long, but their body is a little bit shorter. You can see here on the front, we've talked about how males have those boxing gloves. Their pedipalps carry their reproductive organs on the ends. And he always looks like he's ready to go into the ring and go a few rounds. But the female is the one who spins the nursery web and then tends to the young. Here's what we're talking about now. Here's that same spider. And I tried to capture the web itself, and the pictures, I just wasn't happy with how they look, but it's a large, kind of a tangled web. Last week, we looked at the very neat and orderly web of the Argiope spiders, one of the largest orb weavers we have in this area. Their signature is that zipper or stabilimentum that goes down the middle. The nursery web spider, really, they will spin a large, sort of disorderly looking web, usually near water. And then the female will guard it in a touching show of maternal instinct. She may or may not catch a fish or two. They do have the ability to use the surface tension of water to walk a little bit, and they can catch very small fish, but their more common prey would be the insects that are along the streams that they encounter. But anyway, she will actually forego feeding while she's guarding her nursery web. And then once those little spiderlings hatch and start to disperse, she may or may not have enough energy left to go off and feed again on her own. Sometimes they actually starve as they wait for their young to grow up, to not grow up, just get big enough to leave the nest. But it's just, we tend to think of spiders as being killers. And I can't tell you how many times on Facebook people have asked, what kind of spider is this? And somebody always says it's the kind you burn the house down for. There's so many people who are not fans of spiders, but they just offer so much to our local ecological communities. And when you find out that they've got maternal instincts too, it just makes you want to, well, you don't have to love them, but at least try to protect them and their habitat too. So we're gonna finish up here. It's puffball season. We're right at the beginning. As we get into September, hopefully we'll get a little bit more moisture and we'll see these start to pop up even more. I remember the first time I saw a giant puffball, at first I thought it was a beach ball. Some people have told me they thought they found a skull at first, but they really do live up to their name, giant. Softball size. A 16-inch softball would be a small giant puffball. I've seen them as big as, maybe a foot or more across. This one was a nice little grouping of small, medium, and large. They tend to grow, I see them mostly in woodlands, but when you read about them, they say that they can be found in grassy fields. I know some people have found them growing in their yards too. One of the nice things about giant puffballs is that they are edible. If you find one that is firm, white and firm, it's not mushy at all. If you break a piece off, if it's firmly white inside, it's still in the edible phase. The reason it creates this form is that it's generating spores, millions and millions of spores, and eventually, if it's not eaten, those spores, the puffball will finish maturing and it'll get kind of this icky yellow green color, and then poof, it'll send those spores everywhere. But if you get it at this stage, you're in an area where you can pick mushrooms, which by the way, does include state parks. It does not include forest preserves. Can't take mushrooms from McCain County Forest Preserve. You can take them though from Illinois state parks. You can take them home and you can eat them. Please, please, please don't think you're gonna munch on it as you're leaving. Because that's no good. I had a friend years ago who said he tried, he'd heard about how delicious they are, how actually they're not that delicious, they're sort of bland, but he heard they were edible, he was hungry, he took a bite. He went down a little bit of a psychedelic journey. So this is definitely a mushroom that if you're going to eat it, you need to cook it But I found this really cool website, the Kitchen Frau. And she has a whole bunch of really delicious sounding puffball recipes. Puffball Parmesan, sweet and sour puffballs, puffball pizza, puffball French fries, cheesy puffball pasta, the lemon and garlic puff. There's, I start to sound like I work at the Bubba Shrimp and Puffball Company, Puffball Parmesan. I get where I'm going with that. But this is something, if you haven't tried puffball, no, I've not been this adventurous. I'll saute it with a little garlic and butter. I have a time or two dipped it in egg and poured syrup on it. It's, to me, a giant puffball is kind of like tofu. It will absorb or take on the flavors of whatever you're cooking it with. But anyway, keep your eye out for them. And if you're in an area where you can harvest a puffball mushroom, I encourage you to try it. Start out slow. If it's something you've never tried before, they're not really known to cause any digestive upset. They're certainly unmistakable. There's not another mushroom around here that looks like the giant puffball. But if it's firm and white and you want to give it a try, I say go for it. So next week, we're going to be taking a look at another prairie plant known as rattlesnake master. Got some pictures of some cool crab spiders that we're noticing now on some of those local prairie plants. Another time when I was at Hickory Knolls, it was feeding, Feed the Snakes Day. So we actually do a program there called Snakes at Supper Time. So got a little footage there. I'm going to talk about how snakes are able to feed, even though they don't have paws, they don't have toes, digits to help shove that food down. It's a pretty amazing process. That's Billy the bull snake there. We're going to watch him have a little snack. Who knows what else is going to come down the pike? We usually get some interesting emails. We'll have to see what happens next week at this time. Anyway, with that, I'm going to stop the share. Looks like we got some chats to address. And yeah, Kay, I'm going to get a stunt lip balm, or maybe this is the stunt lip balm and I need to get just a, a fancy, one that I don't carry around in my pocket and lay down next to all sorts of inedible sorts of things. And Wallace has, in addition to those cooking tips, cook them as you would a button mushroom. So yeah, appreciate that. Has anybody else got any mushroom cooking tips? I was going to do a segment on chanterelles. I'd found some of those this summer, but I didn't get a chance to try them, and I don't like to recommend something without having tried it first. We're moving into hen of the woods. We're kind of on the cusp of the end of chicken of the woods, which is the orangish mushroom, and we're moving into hen of the woods season. So if I find one of those, we'll talk a little about that too. Anybody else have any questions or observations from the past week? If not, I think it stopped raining.
Hey, Pam.
Yes.
We had a tobacco hornworm brought into school yesterday. And I looked it up, and I looked at the difference between a tomato hornworm and a tobacco hornworm. So as you showed that picture today, I knew exactly what you're talking about. And I saw that and actually I've seen a couple of those moths out on the playground too, and did not know whether there was the connection, but apparently there is.
Did you see them? Is there a garden by your school that grows tomatoes?
Yes, we have tomatoes and we have corn and we have sunflowers right in the playground. We have a little garden plot.
Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did one time see a hornworm on nightshade plant. Nightshades are in that same family as tomatoes. So I suppose it's possible to see one of those hornworms even if you're not growing tomatoes. But yeah, this is the time of year, and that those moths are huge. I've not.
Now, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, I've never. I've only seen the moths in the daytime when they're done doing their nighttime flying around. But I know they're important nighttime pollinators. But whenever I see them, they're usually resting, probably having been drawn to a light or something, and they're stuck on the side of a building in the daytime.
Right, that's exactly where I saw it today. But now I've noticed maybe in the last week or so, some of them have had a bald head. Like just that they're like the top of it has rubbed raw or something like that. And I wondered if that was something that was sick, or I don't know. It was interesting.
Actually, now that you mentioned it, the picture that I showed, it looked, yeah, there was like a little bit of the hairs were missing at the top.
Yeah.
I wonder if that happens from shoving their head in a flower and pollinating.
Okay.
Happens from bumping against a light. I don't know about that, but now I'm going to go back and look at that picture again, blow it up a little bit more, because it did look like a chunk of the fur was missing.
Yeah, and I think I might have sent you a picture earlier today of one of the moths, and I think it had a receding hairline.
Oh, well.
I know.
They are adults at that point. And
now the hornworm, so it would make a chrysalis or it would make a cocoon?
No, they pupate. They actually burrow down into the soil. They do not. They're moth, and typically a moth would produce silk and make some kind of, but they are they're a brownish. You can see the proboscis coming down. It's a looks like a brown pupa without a cover, and they burrow down in the soil. If you find one, like if you're digging in the fall or something in your garden and you find one, it'll move. It'll wiggle its abdomen and stuff. But yeah.
So if we have one in the classroom in a container but not soil, it's not going to have any soil then to dig down into, correct?
Correct. If you have a hornworm, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, but give it some soil and let it bury itself.
Okay.
If you find a hornworm, give some tomato leaves to eat. They're probably getting close to the time of where they're going to pupate, and that's how they spend the winter. Then is down in the soil. So once it does that, maybe keep it in a refrigerator or something over the winter, so you don't end up with a moth, in March or something.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Fun.
Yeah, no, we have it in a container in the class, so yeah, this will be interesting to see what happens with that.
More fun in the garden.
I'm just hoping it doesn't get any rice on its back.
Oh, yeah. Little rice. Well, if it's still feeding, it's probably okay. Those when they've got the wasp larvae inside of them, they are kind of zombie like. They might still be eating, but you can tell something's not quite right with them. Sometimes the skin gets kind of a look to it. Yeah.
No, this one looks pretty good.
Good. Yeah, well, good luck with that. If it pupates, take a picture.
No, I will.
All right. Thanks, Mrs. Trisha.
You're welcome.
And Diane, that's a very similar memory. I bet a lot of us have one. Diane said that the gardeners in her family used to burn the tomato hornworms with the plant branches that they had fed on. Yeah, my grandma was not a fan of, I mean, she would, a good German gardener, she would take them and just, kind of give them a mush and give them a toss and said, well, the birds can eat them. But she had no use for them either. I think as we've come to know more about the species and we see how it relates to others, and now knowing that there's this ready population of wasps that are, hoping to have the chance to help control the population. I just try to, it's a terrible thing that I don't know which would be worse, getting burned in a burn pile or getting eaten from the either way, it's not so great for the hornworm.
Yeah, my grandfather was an avid gardener, and I mean that I believed that like that was the only way to get rid of them was to burn them. And it's funny because I was just thinking about that the other day, and I had these memory. All of a sudden, the memory popped in my mind of we would always gather them up and have this bonfire.
The hornworm war roast.
I know. So wow. I'm sorry. I apologize for my family.
No, it is not at all unusual. I think, yeah, like I know neither one of my grandmas had any use for them at all. And I think my mom just thought they were icky.
Mhm.
But everything has a job to do. Does anybody else have anything else they'd care to share?
Yeah, Pam,
Okay.
please. Hi. The giant puffballs, they're somewhat kind of particular where they grow or right conditions. Some years are better than others, and you're right, woodlands tend to be where they're at, and it tends to be late fall. Is it kind of a dry cause effect?
I always associate them. Yeah, it seems like moisture, the times I've seen the really big ones, we've been in the midst of a fairly moist fall. And a friend of mine found one like 3 weeks ago, which to me seemed really, I always associate them with September and October as we start doing our school field trips at the park district, and we're out either scouting where we're going to be doing a field trip, or we're actually conducting the trip, and some kid sees one and thinks they found a dead body or something. Then so September and October, depending on when the frosts come too, yeah, and into November. But they're certainly more of a fall mushroom as opposed to, like, morels are distinctly in the spring, and I would slot the puffballs is distinctly in the fall.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sure. Well, with that, anybody else have anything? If not, I sure appreciate you spending part of your Tuesday evening here. I don't know if the insect sounds came through. I can hear there's a very distant katydid here in the neighborhood, and there's a kind of a steady hum of some ground crickets. And last night there was a snowy tree cricket on the sliding door here on the deck, and I was all excited. I thought, maybe we would have a temperature cricket telling us exactly what the temperature is during the good-natured hour. But I don't know, it's maybe taking the night off. Anyway, have a great rest of your week, everybody, and hope to see you back again next week. Take care.
Well, good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you, Pam. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pam.
Bye.
Thanks,
Take
Pam.
care.
Good night.
You too. So long.
Thank you, Pam.